Welcome everybody back to Friar Talk. Today, we finally got some Padres news. It is now confirmed that Xander Bogaerts is going to be moving to second base, and Ha-Seong Kim will be at shortstop. Mike Schilt just said this recently, and this is something that we had kind of been asking for a lot last year. Not that Xander Bogaerts was a bad shortstop, but you're just going to get more out of your players if you have Kim at short and you have Xander at second. Xander's career numbers, he's much better at second than he is at short. And Kim's probably one of the best fielders, if not the best infielders in the MLB. So right now we're looking at it, and I think this makes a whole lot of sense. I think that it's just kind of a clear move that they needed to make. Chase, Isaac, what do you guys think about this one?
I think it's a really solid move. You have your best shortstop actually playing shortstop now. Kim is probably going to be a lot more valuable defensively at shortstop. He's going to get a little bit more range than Xander, and it's kind of a nice transition for Xander to not have much free taxing of a position, I guess you can say. We saw his wrist flare up a lot last year. Hopefully it's kind of a move to just be like, hey, you know what? You're going to play a little bit easier position. You don't need to be as mobile, especially with Cronenworth on the right side of the infield. They can kind of split that area pretty evenly, and then Machado and Kim, it's just going to be a lockdown infield either way. I don't think Kim's numbers really changed too much like you see between 2022 and 2023. They're kind of similar in WAR standards, but Kim just hit a lot better in 2023. I feel like he's in a position where he's going to be a little bit more comfortable. The area that we saw Kim's numbers change the most is within the lineup, so I'm not really too worried about him being like, oh, wow, he's going back to his original position. Are we seeing a drop-off in production at the plate? I don't really think so. I think as long as Schilt keeps him in that leadoff spot, I think, his production is going to be fine. Hopefully this means less wear and tear on Xander's wrist, and we can see a really healthy season out of him instead of him going, you know what, my wrist has been bothering me for the last 2 weeks. I've been one of the worst hitters on the team. I've been hit into I don't know how many inning-ending double plays. It's just one of those things where I think it's going to be, hey, you know what, we're going to maintenance him, and even then, it's kind of a nice gradual shift to him playing first where it's going to be even less physically taxing on his wrist, and maybe we can get even a little bit more of a healthy Xander, and Cronenworth and Xander can switch positions, and we get the good old Cronenworth that he doesn't drop his shoulder and try to hit bombs, and he can go back to being that gap-to-gap hitter that he is.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny. Xander Bogaerts shows up for his first day at spring training, and he got moved to second base. I kind of like that Mike Schilt dropped his cojones and said, hey, you're going to be moving over to second base because our best shortstop is going to be playing shortstop. That was the main argument last year, right? That was the main concern was your worst shortstop, arguably your worst shortstop. You could say maybe Jake's the worst shortstop, maybe Manny's the worst shortstop. I definitely don't think Manny's the worst shortstop. But one of your worst shortstops on your roster was playing shortstop. Kim was valuable at second base. He put up a 4.4 F4. He put up a 3.7 F4 in 2022 at shortstop. But the difference, like Chase said, was the offensive numbers. The offensive numbers last year were better than the ones the year prior. So with the offensive numbers that Kim put up this past year, he probably puts up another 4 WAR season at shortstop. So you're looking at a really valuable player either way. Xander actually, in my opinion, gains more value at second base. He can actually hit for some power. He'll hit for 20 plus home runs, hopefully, if he bounces back this season. One thing you saw at second base with Jake Cronenworth was that he was putting up 4.4 F4 seasons despite having a 720 OPS, like in 2022. If Xander puts up a 780 or an 800 OPS the way he usually does, he could realistically flirt with a 5 WAR at second base. Because I don't think he was a bad defender at shortstop last year. I think he was an all right defender. I would say he was a good defender. The numbers on Baseball Savant show that he was average to good defender. So I think it's a good move. I think it makes a ton of sense because I don't think Xander Bogaerts was going to be playing shortstop for the foreseeable future. Realistically, from the reports that we've been seeing, it looks like there's a kind of a lot of fluctuation between the reports we've been seeing. One saying they might trade Ha-Seong, one saying they want to extend Ha-Seong, and there's just a bunch of clashing. And it seems like the Padres aren't able to make up their minds, but this is kind of a step in the direction of them saying we want him around for the foreseeable future. We just don't know if we can do it. So it's a good move. It makes a ton of sense, at least for 2024. Manny looks like he is going to be back sooner than expected. He was already making throws from third base to first base yesterday or the day prior. It's a lot of good moving things. Things are moving along in the Padres 2024, I guess, is what you could say. So things are coming along quite well. Now, of course, you still don't have an outfielder, which we'll talk about that here soon. You still need a left-handed pitcher, which, if you ask me, the lineup is more of a priority than getting a left-handed pitcher. But I do think along the way they're going to figure it out, and they're going to become a – I don't think they're going to be a top-tier roster the way we thought they were going to be in 2023. But I do think they'll be a formidable roster. I think they're going to be one where they'll compete for a wild card spot, and maybe they can make a push. But things are looking – they're on the upswing for sure.
Yeah, and before we kind of get into just like why it makes sense and stuff like that, I do want to bring up just the numbers, the difference in the numbers from Kim and Bogaerts. Now, Bogaerts has mainly played shortstop for a long time now, but he does sometimes play second base. Sometimes they shift him, or when they used to have the shift more, like he would come over, and the numbers were always a lot better when he was on the right side of second base. But if you look at just overall, like their numbers on Baseball Savant, range-wise, Ha-Seong Kim has been a 90 percentile range guy. He's been in the mid-60s in arm strength. Meanwhile, you look at Xander Bogaerts, not like he's bad. He's in the 80s of percentile in range. He's a very rangy player still. But the thing is, arm strength-wise, he's in the 20s to 30s in percentile there. So, you're talking about probably like a double in terms of where he lays arm wise, and he's a little bit more rangy. He's the better player to go to shortstop. And that's something where, like, last year we were talking about this a lot, where it's like they're not putting their guys in the best spots to succeed. And that's been a complaint that we've had about the Padres organization a lot. This is them doing that. This is them being like, hey, Xander, you're worse at playing short. You're not bad at playing short. You're not a bad shortstop. You're still an above average player there, but you're also an above average player at second. And we have a guy that can be an elite shortstop. So we're going to put him at short, and he's going to be elite there. So it makes a lot of sense. Now, you brought up Jake Cronenworth. This is the part that's interesting. We talk about, getting the most out of certain positions. And like this was the argument for Fernando in center, because it's like, well, if you put Fernando in center, he's going to put up stupid numbers. You can put up Mike Trout numbers, right? Well, the problem with Jake is that when Jake was at first base, he wasn't valuable. Why? Because he's a second baseman at first base. That's not valuable. And then you saw Garrett Cooper come in the lineup, and what do you know? Their offense got a lot better. So I think it's something too where it's like we also got to monitor just how good this team is. Like, what's Jake's role? Because ideally, if you have Xander at second, you have Kim at short, and you have Manny at third, and you have a legit first baseman with pop, that's a really good infield. Like that is that's maximizing the lineup of your infield. So they still got to do that part. And I think that's going to be a biggest thing. Another thing for Xander Bogaerts, I know that he finished last year. This is my final piece on Xander, and then we can kind of get into just kind of where the team's at. But Xander, he finished with a 790 OPS, right? It's not that bad. The previous 2 seasons where he was, talked about as one of the best overall hitters in the sport, he finished with an 833 and an 863. So yes, it's a drop off. It's not that crazy, but you go look at batting run value, and this is the part that's crazy. Xander's batting run value in 22 was 93rd percentile on Savant, and his base running was 96. Last year, he was sitting at 16 and 33. He dropped 75 points in his batting value. And you want to know why that is? It's because Xander Bogaerts had a 720 OPS, was one of the least clutch hitters in the sport, and then he got really hot for the last 3 weeks of the season when it didn't matter. So I keep hearing people talking about like, oh, Xander wasn't that bad. It's like, no, Xander was that bad. He was 16th percentile at shortstop. Like, that's horrible, guys. He was awful with runners in scoring position. So Xander needs a bounce back season. And Chase, you brought this up. The wrist injury was an issue. You move him to second, you're going to get less reps out there. You're not asked to do as much because Jake is probably going to be at first base. He's very rangy there. And I hope that we see a bounce back, because I think people try to act like Xander didn't have an abysmal season. He had an abysmal season. The advanced analytics tell you, yeah, he was horrible every time he came up when it mattered. And he was coming up when all the guys were on consistently and grounding in the double plays. So I think that's what we got to look at, is like Xander had his worst season last year. He needs to be better, and they're moving him to second to hope that he is better. So I like the move. I overall think this is a really good move. I think it's important too. Like I think it's like it might not seem like that much. Like, hey, they're both in the lineup, they're both in middle infield, but just kind of what they're establishing is like we're gonna put our best players in the best spots. We need to see that from this organization. They haven't really done that. So that's kind of my overall thought on it. We are gonna tomorrow, or I guess we're gonna double up today and have 2 videos out today. We're gonna talk about all the Padres trade rumors. They've had trade rumors with the Red Sox and the Brewers. And then on Sunday night, we're going to be doing this live stream as well. So make sure to tune in for all those. But that's kind of my overall piece. Chase Isaac, what else? What else are you thinking on this move in terms of Cronenworth, Xander, whoever it is?
If we do sign like that first base DH guy like Garrett Cooper, I think we might see the revival of Cronenworth a little bit. He could be that platoon player that he can, hey, you know what, this guy struggles against certain guys. Cronenworth can slot right in there. Key utility infield, kind of how like Ha-Seong Kim was his first year. Kind of let him slowly get back and acclimated to either a new swing, a new approach at the plate, and it gives you a little bit more power at first base. Or, you can throw him at third for now, considering Machado might miss like the first few weeks right now. I know he's already throwing things, but you don't want to rush him into being the everyday third baseman. It's a long season. I'd rather, he's throwing already, but let's take it a little bit slow, have Manny DH. Let's say Garrett Cooper go to first and then Cronenworth go to short. Or, hey, you know what? Ha-Seong Kim, you're going to start at short. Cronenworth Ha-Seong Kim go to third. Cronenworth go to short for now. And then once Machado gets back, he goes back to being kind of the platoon infielder where, hey, you know what? It's a long season. Guys are going to need rest days. He could be playing basically every other day. And like every guy is playing gets a rest day maybe every 5-6 days. And Cronenworth is playing every other day. He's going to be put into pinch hitting situations, defensive situations. And I think it adds depth that the Padres desperately need. And so, I think that'd be a good move.
I really like your take on that, Chase. I think it's smart to, if we are assuming that Manny's going to be missing a portion of the season, at least on the field, your best lineup is with probably Cronenworth at short and Kim at third. I think Kim's a great third baseman. I think Kim's a great infielder either way, at least until Manny comes back. Then you go ahead and you put Manny back at third. You put Kim back at short, and then Cronenworth can – somebody hopefully should get that guy an outfield glove and teach him a little bit of outfield because Lord knows we're in desperate need of an outfielder. But he doesn't need to be locked in first base. He's not a first baseman. His numbers don't indicate that he's a first baseman. And even then, defensively, as much as we thought he was going to be a great defensive first baseman, the numbers show he really wasn't that great of a defensive first baseman. So ideally, yes, he plays first base sometimes, but kind of in the way that he did in 2021 or 2020 when, he'd be there sometimes, not all the time. Ideally, you have him sometimes playing short. You have him sometimes playing second, sometimes first, sometimes if you really need it, left field, because left field is easy to play at Petco Park. It's at least easier than the other 2 positions out there. So realistically, that's a formidable lineup, I think, right? Where let's say you get Garrett Cooper, you get a power hitting first baseman. Now my ideal lineup would probably be something along the lines of Kim. I know Xander says he doesn't like to hit second, but Kim, Xander, Manny, Fernando. Xander, Fernando, Manny, power hitter, Cronenworth, Kim. There's a lot of things you could do. Ideally, Kim's in the leadoff spot against lefties, and he's batting 6th or 7th against righties. And I really like that lineup. I like the potential of that lineup. And then you go out and get someone like, the guys we're going to talk about in the next video. And suddenly your lineup is looking so much deeper than it did on, what's the date today? February 16th, 2024. It's suddenly looking a lot deeper if you go ahead and make these kind of moves, right? Either way, back to Xander Bogaerts, I think he's going to have a bounce back season. I think he had an amazing first month. Like, he was the best hitter throughout the first month of the season. He gets plunked in his wrist, and then he's trash for a ton of the season. So, ideally, I do think he's going to become one of the better hitters in baseball again, at least when it comes to hitting for average. And I'm confident in that statement. I think he's going to be maybe not worth $25 million that we paid him, but I think he's going to be a valuable player for the Padres. I think he's going to put up a 4.5 or a 5 WAR. And the thing with that is that if you go on his F WAR, you'll see he put up a 4 WAR last year. However, like Matt said, it's not really indicative of the whole story of Xander Bogaerts' 2023 season, because for much of the season, he wasn't that good. He wasn't that good. And it was really unfortunate how many times we had to see him come up he was batting fourth most of the season. It was really unfortunate how many times we had to see him come up and hit into an inning-ending double play. When you look at the reasons why the Padres are one of the worst hitting teams with runners in scoring position last year, the first two guys you're going to look at are Xander Bogaerts and Manny Machado. That's just my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but those are the first two guys you're going to look at. But the primary is going to have to be Xander Bogaerts. And in my opinion, you need to get him out of that fourth spot. You need to get him back into the top part of the lineup. And I think he'll be valuable there. I think he's going to have a good season.
Yeah, and I think the risk thing is a big indicator of that too. I also think too, Isaac, I think, the guys at the bottom of the lineup, or not even bottom of the lineup, but the Trent Grisham and Matt Carpenter basically going damn near over on the season with runners in scoring position. That one probably hurts a little bit too. But yeah, dude, that was the issue of their lineup. And I think, like, dude, if you get a bat like Chase, like you're saying, you get a first base bat. The other thing is, this isn't a lineup that's really deep, right? Like, they don't really have, like, it's a lot of questions. But what you can do is you can use Cronenworth as a utility guy. And the other thing you can do is you don't have to necessarily have a true DH, because you can have Manny at DH one day. Then you have Fernando. Then you have Xander. Then you have Kim. Like, you can rest guys a lot and use that DH spot. And when, let's say, Cronenworth is playing first base, well, then Garrett Cooper can slide over, or whoever that power hitting first baseman is can go slide over and be a DH. It goes a long way to have one power bat, one more first base DH power bat. And what we're looking at right now with this team is, I feel like we're not going to see any moves pitching wise. Maybe, right? Maybe they can bring someone in. Maybe like Ryu or someone like that. Like, maybe one guy. I don't know if we're going to see that. But from the lineup perspective, they're going to trade for a center fielder, and they need to sign a cheap power bat to play first base and DH. And if they do that, that's probably what you're going to see from their team starting out the season, because you're going to see Profar competing with a bunch of young guys to play left field, and you're going to hopefully have a younger center fielder. And we're going to talk about those guys in just a little bit, but that's where this team is at. That's what we're seeing right now. It's kind of finally unfolding a little bit, even though they're not really adding a whole lot so far outside of just Profar. But that's what we're going to see. So we're going to talk about later today. We're going to talk about these trade rumors, talk about what we believe, what's going on with them. That's going to be a fun episode to talk about, because I think that you're going to see a type of move. Like, I think there's a lot of steam to these, and I think it makes so much sense. And this is just what they're going to do. Maybe it's not with these specific teams, but there's how they're going to build this roster is going to be trading for a center fielder. So we're going to talk about that, and we'll have that video out in a few hours. And then Sunday night, we're going to do a stream. Not sure exactly what time yet, but we'll do a stream and we'll put up what time we're going to have that one as well. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you all in a couple hours here.